want to miss that. That's a good thing, a good story.
Uh,
So
how
it
else
took
can
stress out of parenting, you said.
will take stress out because you know how stressful it is that the kids want to go outdoors, outside, and how often can you do that? At least in these urban environments. I grew up where we were running out of the house regardless of whether my parents let us or not. But there was a lot of open space and green space and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And water to play in.
Yeah. No, it's been, I have always felt very appreciative of the place. And I remind myself over time not to take it for granted. And it's really something that my other phrase was to say that this was the last house I was ever going to buy, and that my ashes, they can put them in the backyard, and that's the end of that.
Here comes Judy. So, Brian, we're not seeing your face, but thank you for coming. It's good to have you. I don't even want to ask what time it is where you are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I'm sure Brian
yeah,
gets a
just setting
prize
up
for
here.
distance. Oh, sorry, Brian.
No worries. Yeah, here in Australia, just getting set up here, so maybe I'll be able to join by video in a bit, but enjoying the audio.
Well, so what time is it where you are?
It's middle of the day, 11:30, and we're
Oh, it's not
preparing
too
for
bad.
a hurricane, so I'm actually pretty tied up getting our our acre prepared because we have a Category 2 hurricane coming in the next 48 hours.
Okay. Well,
Brian gets a prize for distance. Time, but I thought it would be a lot worse.
yeah, I did too. I did too.
And for
it's tomorrow.
and being prepared for nature.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we're looking for a permaculture place here, so I'm interested in learning all about the Davis area and really trying to understand, what it means to build a food forest or find a food forest. We have found some properties that look promising on the Sunshine Coast, which is going to get a lot of rain. And I'd rather find a full food forest than have to rebuild one or build one. But very interested in understanding what we can learn from Davis.
Ah. Tell us a little bit more about your location in Australia, if you don't mind.
Yeah, happy to
Thank you.
provide you with information on that. We're in the hinterlands of the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia right now. It's one of the few areas in Australia that is projected to have increased rainfall under an RCP 8.5 scenario where there would be a lot of global warming from, everyone burning fossil fuels, as appears to be the plan for the rest of this decade. So
Mhm.
with that in mind, we're looking at the Sunshine Coast, which will have steady or increased rainfall. And it's going to remain a lush green oasis. In fact, most of the tree growers, the fruit tree growers, are located on the Sunshine Coast. It's a very Floridian climate. The entire Cape York Peninsula can be viewed as a upside down or a mirror, an analogy to the Florida climate, just reflected across the equator. And so the analogy is very apt. And so we get monsoonal summers and cool, clear winters, and the winters you get a lot of sunlight, so it's good for passive solar, as I've discussed with Carl Welty. And so it's there's a lot of permaculture work here. The Permaculture Education Institute is in Mullaney, There are a lot of fruit trees, and we did cassava and taro, and bunya trees are the local. They're like pine trees where you eat the pine cones. Pine cones are this big, and the bunya nuts are quite a good starch. But it takes 20 years to grow a bunya tree. Like we've got one here that was planted probably 20 years ago, and the first bunya nuts we just harvested last year. So
Wow.
I have the benefit that our forefathers planted half or a dozen fruit trees and macadamia nuts and bunya nuts here
Sure. I mean,
10,
it-
20 years ago.
the ones that you're going to plant now are going to be for your children, and then they'll
They
remember
will.
you, and the
They will. The
grandchildren will
problem
say,
is
"Yeah,
So
Grandpa Brian."
I'm older.
Judy is here, so I would like to start the webinar.
I
if we
mean,
could.
somebody
Is that all right?
has to plant the tree.
That's right. And the thing is, we're renting this place, so we have to
Oh,
find our next food forest and
that's a little
find
different.
something that exists and that we can improve upon. That's our challenge.
Yeah, renting makes it different. Yeah. Hi,
Hey,
Judy.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi,
Judy.
so can you turn on your video?
If she wants to.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. And I'm hiding
Yes.
for a moment. I'm going to hide.
Okay,
That's-
all right. All right, so
No,
we'll give you a moment to finish your dinner.
Oh, yes. There you are. Well, thank you, Judith, for joining us, for accepting this invitation that I received from Catherine Alexander, who I met a couple of years ago through some other social website events that, in my opinion, is the best invention of the 21st century,
Yeah.
that we can do this. I mean, of all the tech, this one is the one that I admire the most because we can do this. It's remarkable. I can see my family or talk to the children or
Yes.
So yes, thanks, Judith.
Yeah.
Hi, Seth.
Hello.
Hello.
So
Nice
why
to
don't we
see you all
introduce
here.
ourselves? Why don't we take this time? Because
Yeah,
so
yeah,
Seth,
Oh, okay.
sure.
Seth Wachtel. I direct the architecture program at the University of San Francisco
Yeah.
and teach through real world projects locally and internationally, focused on underserved communities and threatened environments. So I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful.
I wanted to, if I may, I'll introduce myself next, Catherine, now that
Sure.
sorry about that, but I wanted to share with Seth that we have a couple countries in common that you've been at doing work. I was born in Colombia. I lived in Mexico for 3 years. My father uh, divorced my mom and went to Mexico with another family. And I met him there for 3 years, finished my high school. And then I went back to Colombia, and then I emigrated to Israel and spent 1.5 years in Israel. And the other place we have in common is the San Francisco Bay Area, because that's the reason I came to California is that I asked a California girl to marry me. And she says yes.
He said
And
yes, good.
she said yes. If she had said no, you wouldn't be seeing me right now, because I would have had a different life.
Right.
I would have been in Israel. Who knows?
Where in Israel? Where in Colombia? Where in Mexico?
I was born in Barranquilla
Okay.
and in the coast. I grew up in Bogota, lived in Medellin, Cali, then in Mexico in the Distrito Federal. And then in Israel, I arrived at kibbutz south of Tel Aviv called Hatzor by Ashdod, if you're familiar with Israel, obviously. And then we moved around a bit.
Okay.
So we came to California to visit her family. And this is my introduction. And then Sharon had been a student at UC Davis, and then she had done a PELP, which allows the student to take a year off from school and be able to get back to school without having to go through the paperwork. And so she traveled to Israel during that year. Her father is from Israel. And then obviously then we got together, came to California. They live in Fremont. She brought me to Davis for her to go to the campus and sign up again for the next year of school. We had already decided, both of us. I had been studying in Columbia. I was studying business administration, like night school. And then, so I get to Davis, and this city of Davis was fascinating to me because you could be on a bicycle without being run over. And so I thought, wow, this is what civilization is like. And then anyway, so we both went through school, and we moved in to Village Homes in 1995 with 2 kids. And I was sharing earlier what it meant to me be living here. Yeah. So thanks for being here. And
Yeah.
thanks to Judy, Judy and Mike. I always think that this is the gift that they gave us is remarkable. So
Yes.
thank you, Judy.
So Brian, introduce yourself.
I'm Brian von Herson, Executive Director at the Climate Foundation, working across the Pacific to regenerate life in the ocean. We're in the hinterlands of the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia, unceded Jinibara territory, and we're working to regenerate healthy climate and healthy ecosystems on sea and land. Very interested in how our seaweed products, including seaweed foliar biostimulants, can help to regenerate terrestrial agriculture. It's used for fruiting trees, flowering trees all the time to help to budding and flowering and fruit growing. So that's a really key dimension of it. And looking forward to understanding how we might apply some of the principles. We just wrote an article with Dave Holmgren 12 months ago on applying the permaculture design principles to the marine environment, and I can share that link in the chat. Thank you. Back to you, Catherine.
That's fantastic.
Thank you,
I look
Brian.
forward to
And
seeing it.
before I forget it, I would like to get your paper on the biochar that you talked about this morning.
Okay.
you would send me a
Yeah, there
link
may
to
be a
that.
couple references, mostly online. It's more of a commercial development in India where they're doing communities. But oh yes, 2019, we did a paper with Cornell University. So I'll look for that one as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So Carl, introduce yourself.
Carl Welty, an architect in Southern California, but I grew up in Vacaville, so I'm very familiar with the climate of Davis. So when I talk about Davis is hot, I really know what hot means. I have to be careful because I feel like a little giddy, like starstruck teenager. Judy, it's really a pleasure to meet you. I have been aware of Village Homes for quite a number of years. I was a partner in a firm that you might know about in Claremont that was founded by 2 professors, a landscape architect and an architect, at the John Lyles Center for Regenerative Studies, who developed a project that kind of got some of the big picture that you did in Village Homes, but 12 years later. So I was aware of it, but a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started to look at Village Homes again because I was really interested in learning how to build more resilient communities vis-a-vis wildfire. And I thought that a community that has healthier soil and trees would be something to learn from. And then I've have been deep dive since then.
Thank you. And I'm Catherine Alexander. I'm head of Soil Smart, Soil Wise, and our focus is on the biotic pump in cities to get cities to become resilient and be spongy to absorb rain and therefore be resilient under drought and fire. And Judy Corbett, the star of the show. We're so delighted to have you. We really are. Uh, we're all agog with Village Homes. Carl and I have been really just so impressed with what that particular project really showcases and how much it really reflects that we can do all these things if we really want to. So you were certainly in the forefront of that. So I would like you to introduce yourself and then we'll just go on for questions. You have to unmute if you would, Judy. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I was the right place, right person at the right time, really. My life has kind of been like that. But I married Mike after I graduated from UC Davis and put him through a couple of years of architecture down at Cal Poly. And I loved architecture, and I minored in psychology when I was at Davis, but got a degree in microbiology. And I was really interested in how planning can make you feel. How do you plan to create a safe community? How do you plan to make a community happen? How does a building make you feel? And so then Mike decided that he wanted to go up to Sacramento and build houses, and he had parents who were builders there, and that would be a good place for him to start a design build it project. And I said, no, I want to go back to Davis because somebody had introduced me to a book called oh my gosh, now I can't remember, but Robert Summer, who was sort of a pioneer in environmental psychology, had happened to be at UC Davis. And I read about this and like, oh, this is what I really want to study. So I went back to school, and to get back in, because I had a science degree, I could get into the ecology graduate group, and then I majored in psychology. And that was where a lot of the ideas about the social design of village homes came from. How do you do this so that you create a sense of community? And I'll be darned, it's worked. Thank goodness. And then after that, after Village Homes was done, I was asked by Jerry Brown to start working with local elected officials throughout California to try to get them to do what the city of Davis is doing. And when Jerry left office and the Republican took over, we were prepared for that, and we had a nonprofit ready to go and formed the Local Government Commission, which was in 1983, I think.
Wow.
And so it was a membership organization of the progressive local elected officials of California. And the idea is how to develop sustainability and implement sustainability policies in your community. And it was so much fun getting these young people together that have really wanted to make a difference and giving them ideas and seeing them compete with one another who can do more better. And so that went on until 2014, when I retired from that and took a part-time job at UC Davis. Well, actually, I was working for the vice president of the UC system, and she needed a project and said, what would you like to work on? And I said, water. So she said, okay, go do it. And it seemed to me that what we were seeing was that we were going to have water and we weren't going to have water, and that California is expected to have the same amount of rain, but it's going to come in waves, and then we're going to have droughts, and that groundwater recharge was going to be essential to who we are and what we continue to do. And at that time, too, the legislature began to work on that and did a law called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act to try to get people not to overdraw their wells. But I got together the people who were really pioneering in groundwater recharge, and in the end, it was Stanford University and UC Davis, as well as a number of people in water boards and water districts who came together, and we would figure out, okay, what's keeping you from what you want to do, and how can we fix it? And so that went on for 4 years until COVID, and then that was the end of that. And since then, I've been a member of the board of directors of the Planning and Conservation League, and my focus has been groundwater recharge for them and putting together events to teach others about groundwater recharge and doing a little writing and doing a little legislation and being grandma. Because my kids have moved into village homes and so have my grandchildren.
And
Isn't
you've
that
been there
great?
since the beginning, yeah?
Pardon
Judy,
me? Yeah,
you've
what?
lived there since the beginning, yes?
It took us, we did the first unit and then we moved into the second unit. So yes, almost.
Very good, very good. Very good.
And there's no place I'd
Interview.
rather be.
Yes, wonderful.
Judy, we served on a board together. Groundwork Institute. I don't know if you recall.
Groundwork Institute, that sounds really
With Huck Rourke.
Huh. Tell me more.
Huck lived on the hilltop in Pinole.
Huh, okay.
He was we did pro
Oh,
bono.
I know who you mean. Yeah, the
Yeah.
guy in Pinole with the house on the hill.
That's it.
So I'm curious, Judy, was Jane Jacobs a part of your influence?
Absolutely, yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about that? She's a hero of mine too.
Yeah, well, it was like what makes a great neighborhood? Well, a neighborhood where people have helped make it what it is. And then the narrower streets and more of a sense of community. So I got some ideas from her, but more of my ideas came from Robert Summer and also a couple of women, one at UC Berkeley, who have studied what creates a sense of community. And then there's the sustainability side of it, which we've just learned from a lot of different people. And actually the sustainability side really started with Michael and my brother building the first solar house in Davis. And then the Energy Commission was created, and they were charged in the California, and they were charged with increasing energy efficiency. And so they put together building standards that they had hoped then could be adopted by the Building Standards Commission, which approves all these things. And so I helped convince the builders that they weren't going to die if they can still continue to live and have energy conservation building standards. And it was a fight in the legislature, and it was a fight in the governor's office and at the Building Standards Commission. Long story, but we did it. And so now we have really probably the best building standards, I think, for energy efficiency in the country, I'm guessing.
Who were the women at Berkeley who were influential?
Glenda Humiston? She studied Easter Hill Village and St. Francis Square. And I'm trying to remember her name. She was a landscape architect in the landscape architecture department.
So with Lawrence Halpern.
Yeah. It will come to me eventually.
Did Christopher Alexander have any influence?
Oh yeah, definitely. He was there too in Berkeley at the time.
Yeah. So he was my mentor.
Oh wow.
And
So we have a lot in common.
Yeah, I worked in that office for many years.
Oh, did you really? That's great.
Yeah, I'm interested to know who the other people were as well.
Okay, it'll come. Blair
okay.
Cooper Marcus, that's who it
Oh,
was.
okay. Yeah.
Brian, you have a question or comment?
Well, I just wanted to make a short comment that you mentioned building standards, and one thing I've learned in our residency here in Australia is that they actually use a uniform construction standard for all of Australia when it comes to solar implementation. And so, interestingly enough, the cost of the balance of system to install solar here in Australia is approximately half of what it is in the US because of the difference between the local Byzantine little solar regulations for every building council in the US versus a really standard construction methodology and spec and codes, a nationalized code for Australia. So that was very interesting to me, and the costs have been continuing to drop. But balance of system is now the dominant cost for solar.
But Brian, you're referring, I think you're referring to solar PV panels.
Solar PV in this case.
Yeah.
Because she mentioned that Mike built the first solar home and that there were these various permitting standards, and just wanted to contrast the two systems that I'm familiar with in the two countries. And solar costs are really, balance of system costs are dominating the acceptance of solar in many countries. And it's great to see a path forward that lowers costs.
This passive solar in California in the 70s was passive solar design. And Judy, I went to maybe I shouldn't ask you, but did Michael go to San Luis Obispo or Pomona?
San Luis Obispo. Were you there too? Good.
A little bit later, but
Okay.
but my introduction to passive solar was Ken Haggard, who I'm
Oh yeah.
and I had a class with him in 1979 on passive solar, and we used our textbook was, I think, the manual that you guys, he was quite involved with writing, but it was the manual that the state. I think it was the first manual that came out of all of your work for passive solar.
I have to give my brother credit too, because he built the first solar house that Mike designed in Davis, and now is in charge of building the or designing the update for Title 24 building standards every year.
Oh boy, I like to talk to you. What year was that house in Davis?
Man, it was before we even moved to Village Homes.
So like early 70s.
Yeah, 75 maybe. No, a little earlier than that actually had to be. My
Ken
job.
Haggard built a passive solar house in Atascadero with the water beds on top of the water bag.
Oh
house
yeah.
with
Yeah.
I mean it's probably a lot more water than you would want on your top of your house. I think.
Yes.
I think that my sense is they learned that they didn't have to work so hard to make it work.
Good.
There was Sim Vanderen with the integral urban house on 5th Street.
Yeah, Peter Kalther, Sim Vanderen. Yes.
Right.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, both Christopher and Jane Jacobs are systems thinkers.
Right.
So I would suspect that had a big influence on what you were doing as well. Am I right?
No.
No. Aha.
No. I guess I'm a creative feeling, and if I have to follow a recipe exactly like it's supposed to be, I tend to deviate a little bit.
Maybe a relaxed systems thinker.
Yes,
there you go.
exactly.
I would assert that you're a systems thinker before we called it systems thinking.
Oh, well, maybe that's it. Maybe I don't even know what a systems thinker is, but I have not really read Christopher Allen or Alexander's work as closely as some other people because I found it pretty rigorous. Made
Yeah, no,
sense.
I find him hard to read, frankly.
Okay. Oh, good. That makes me feel better.
It's really hard to read. Yes.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on what you're reading. I could make some suggestions later, but
Okay. Yeah, Jane Jacobs, however, was the first and the only person that I've ever heard who understood that values were systems. And that has been my introduction to her, actually.
Interesting.
And so I did a lot of values work, and she was very instrumental in that. And it made a huge, huge difference in how you understand things. So I'm a fan of systems thinking. But
Good.
yeah.
Sounds like I missed something.
Yeah. And
Do you,
I'm an
do you
old
think that the,
systems engineer.
Oh,
sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I'm an old systems engineer from Silicon Valley who turned in our quit the day job a decade ago and went from designing systems on a chip in Silicon Valley to systems on a ship in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
But we've got a terrestrial component to that as well.
Judy, do you think it would be possible to do today what you did in 1974? I mean, I know there's a lot of political stuff, and there was a climate then too, a sort of a general popular view that doesn't exist today.
I think the popular view is even more in existence. We
Okay.
know more about climate change. Back then, it was just this vague idea. We know more about people really wanting a sense of community.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to be more self-reliant and grow their own food. So I don't think that's gone away at all.
Okay.
Was that the question you had, or
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. I mean, I think part of putting the community together was, I want to say, ideological in the sense that, and philosophical about trying to do things.
Yeah.
And there were some political issues too, just, to get the city to agree to all of this weird stuff.
Yeah, I was trying to think back because I get often asked, why is there only one Village Homes? And there were a couple of things that were in our favor. And one, this was the era of Jerry Brown and
He was amazing.
young, open to thinking.
Yeah.
And the city, of course, had all their rules about how you do all these things, and everybody was really entrenched in that, and they have been taught in school how you do it right. But the head of the city, the mayor of the city was elected, who he'd been the head of the student body at UC Davis, young. And there's just this thing in the air that, yes, the staff is opposed to that, but the engineer said, well, it would work. This water thing, could work, but it's going to be rat infested, weedy. You wouldn't want to do that. That is like a quote. And so our wonderful mayor said, Bob, well, makes sense to me. Let's let them do that. And the natural drainage and narrow streets, I mean, everything was a battle. The planning department head said everything in this development is completely in opposition to everything that I learned in planning school. But the city, with Bob Black as the lead, and then there were a couple of other university members or professors and a teacher on the city council at that time. And with Bob really taking the lead, they followed him. And so we were able to get through that. But the other thing that I'd sort of forgotten about was getting the financing. And the first thing that Mike did was walk into Bank of America with this great idea, and they turned him right around and said, sounds good, but don't come back. and I don't know how many banks he went to, but he was fortunate in that he had parents that were building in Sacramento, not big scale builders, but they were working with a local savings and loan. And so they had a good track record. And so Mike went with his parents to see them, and they said, well, we'll finance the first of the 5 units that you're going to do. And we want to see your parents do the first 50, and you can do the other 50. And if after a year, all of that sold, then we'll continue. And so the
Wow.
houses that his parents built, when this architectural critic came up from the LA Times and called it a ho-hum development, their work, whereas ours he thought was very interesting. And so it sold out in the first unit within a year. And so we were able to sell out all 5 units. Each year we would be able to sell out another 100 of them.
So when you say 5 units, is that 5 houses or 5 sections?
No, 5 subdivision units. So it was about 100 houses apiece.
How
So
much of it-
500 homes.
100 houses.
times 5.
Not quite, but 400 and some odd we have.
How much of the street and the drainage system and the walkways was that built as you built each section?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what the technology today we have is that we could figure out using electromagnetic engineering where the best places would have been to put the ponds. Where Mike figured it out was to just, when he ran across a sandy area that looked like it might have been a stream some day long ago before this was a tomato field, he made the ponds there. So I live on one of those ponds, and at first the water would sit there for 3 days, but now that the trees have penetrated, it's gone in a couple of hours. It's just
Oh, that's
we
the
got
real,
lucky.
that's kind of data that we want to know.
Uh-huh.
Like how it works, like how has the soil changed over, all these years? That's really interesting.
I guess it's more porous, but beyond that, I don't know.
So-
Oh, also another question that you had asked, Catherine, was affordable housing. Is it just apartments? And the answer
Yeah.
is no. We did a co-op house that was funded by the co-op bank, and that's still there. So students can live there. They are limited to 7 years, but they built it themselves, and then it's still there. And then we had some migrant workers from Mexico come up and they did owner build houses for 5 of them. So they're very small. There's a group of about 6 that we planned on maybe being retirement homes. They're just one living room, tiny bedroom, and a little bathroom, and a little solar thing on the end, a glass little hood. And those are not retired, because when we got to selling, there was a real problem with sales. There'd been a recession, and so we asked to be able to just sell it to anybody. And so now there's people with kind of money living in there because the housing here has become so bloody expensive.
Yeah.
There are also 2 sets of apartments. One are little 1-bedroom, 1-bath units. I think there's about 8 of those, 10 of those, and then apartments that Mike built that are cheap. But the idea was we wanted a mixture of incomes, and to some extent we succeeded, but not like as good as it was when we first finished it.
Sure. Sure.
In the early days when it was just post-agricultural, how much time did the 2 of you spend on the land assessing things like the sand and where it might naturally drain?
You'd have to ask Mike that. It was a tomato field, and so he was making
it was
mounds and, making it less than flat, and driving a tractor and pushing the soil around, and that's
So
just
it-
kind of how he learned about the soil.
Okay, so it wasn't watching it through a number of seasons to see what
No.
happened. And,
No, we bought the tomato field and we started building right away.
okay.
I thought it was a wheat field. Am I wrong?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
This is the tomato capital of the world.
As somebody who went to high school in Vacaville, I remember like 80% of the tomatoes harvested or processed in America grow within 50 miles of Davis. So
Wow. Yeah.
Well,
You can see that during harvest season when there's tomatoes spilled across the highways.
Has the hot water continued, or has it gone over to mostly photovoltaic or PV power?
In the beginning, PVs were not affordable. So, hot water. Yeah. Every house had a solar water heater. Now, I'm not sure if some people maybe have removed theirs, but as I'm looking out my window, everybody still has one of those. Now that photovoltaics are more affordable, a lot of people are putting them on and using that for water too.
the development in Claremont, California, Are you familiar? It's called Meadowood. Are you,
No.
Judy? Um, it's similar in that this is systems thinking or regenerative design. To me, the principles starts with how the water and the sun move across the site, which you
Okay.
guys kind of nailed, and you a huge pioneer in that. The designers were an architect and a landscape architect, which I think is critical for that integrated thinking.
Okay.
So the streets are oriented more or less east-west.
Uh-huh.
The site is 40 acres, pretty much a square. But what they did is they created a park in the middle,
Mm,
and so there's 3 cul-de-sacs that come in from each side.
okay.
The slope is significantly more than the Village Homes, which is essentially flat.
Mhm.
I think it's as much as 3% across. And they achieved they all of the drainages on the surface. There's within the park, this common park area, there's a dry creek bed that they created, mimicking a dry creek bed. There there are, I think, 3, maybe 4. It's more, but what's in so and also the soil is very different. This is lots of rock, so the water goes in very fast.
Mm.
But there's I've done some analysis of this and comparing it to a similar size area that was developed more conventionally. But so there's about 28 linear feet of storm drain inlet
Mm.
versus the more conventional development. There was 130 linear feet, so you could easily conclude that 80% of the water is going into the ground. So it's there are no fruit trees. The designers were working for a kind of more of a standard developer who just happened to walk into a different kind of office.
Oh,
We always said that it's similar to Village Homes, but without quite so much, with not so much vision.
okay.
Um, but so it's I think it's always interesting to compare, what's similar, what's different.
Yeah. I just happened to think about affordability. What happened not very many months ago was that in the California legislature, a bill passed saying that you could do a grandmother unit and you didn't have to get permission from the homeowners association or the city.
Oh.
And then for larger developments, if they do like 20%, they are immune from having to follow codes. So that in Village Homes is happening already. As I walk around, I'm seeing extra things sort of pop up, which will make more affordability. A little scary because we no longer have any design control over any of those.
Oh, wow.
But we'll see how that goes.
Wow, that's a change.
Was
I
that
wanna
something that
welcome-
was that something that you could have embedded in the rules of the development, that there was some
Yeah.
oversight?
I think that granny units would have been approved. We intended to do one.
I mean, in terms of location and appropriateness for the ecosystem.
Well, the way the homeowners association works here is you have to get approval from the homeowners association board of directors in order to build.
Mhm.
So there were certain things that we were interested in was the orientation and making sure that there was private space on the street side and that the common area sides were open so people would be looking out over them all the time, stuff like that.
I want to go a little more deeper into those kinds of contracts, but I want to welcome Patrick.
Yeah,
think.
sorry.
And feel free to turn on your video and join us. If you have questions, feel free to ask them also. And Brian, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm interested in the kind of HOA contracts as well, but
Yeah.
curious about the ratio of residents to gardens. And I've been looking at the satellite view and whatnot, and I'm interested to ask you whether there were too many gardens, not enough gardens, or just right? And get your thoughts on that.
I think it's just right. Last year, oh dear. Oh, okay. We have this one area somewhere in there, um, which is just community gardens. Yeah, you nailed it. And so you can get a fairly large space, and then you can also garden in your common area. So I have plenty of vegetable space and fruit trees in my common area, and so I don't use the other space. So it allows it to be pretty flexible. You can use your common area for growing things or not. But if you want to get it in a larger scale, you can take a piece of the homeowners association's land and do your own.
And to
Or-
clarify, you've got roads interleaved with common areas with the path. And is all of this common area that people use for gardens?
Yes,
I'm not sure you're in the right area, Brian.
I
Well,
think you had it. The circle that you made.
Yeah, I think it's over to your
Well,
right
this is
here.
this is the large common areas, but I think
Oh,
Judith
this
might have been.
isn't Village
You
Homes.
have it. You have it.
Okay. Good.
so
So
I
there's
got a similar question as Brian. So the common area, is that the area between the swale and the walkway between, it's not the street and the house?
Yeah, the swale follows through the common areas. Yeah, you got it. So there's a swale next to the path all the way through. The reason for the common areas was that in the research that I did when I was a graduate student, I came to the conclusion that community happens when people have a place to get together and a reason to get together. Also, security happens when you have a division between public space, semi-public space, and semi-private space. But everybody also needs private space because if they don't get private space physically, they withdraw. If you need to be alone, you just kind of tend to just stay away from everybody. So that the common areas is sort of integral to the building of a sense of community.
So that's interesting. The private space is presumably inside. The semi-private is the common area with the paths, and then the public might be shared gardens or parks.
Yeah, and the private space is on the street side, so people are allowed to put in a fence next to the street, but
Okay.
no fences on the common area side.
But
Oh,
but
that's
there's
good.
also some private. I think my sense is there's a like a patio or something on the back side of the house, which might be shielded from the common area by some planting. Is that so? There's an outdoor space that's kind of private. Is that?
The common area was not meant to be private.
No. But there's a patio on the back side of the house. Typically, it seems like, and
Yeah.
that's on the side of the house that's opposite the street.
So that there should.
Are there so there's not it's my from walking your video, it seems like there's an outdoor space that's sort of semi-private.
To dance on some of that.
Initially, it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be open, but what has happened is in some areas the vegetation has grown up,
Okay.
but they're not allowed to have a fence.
No, not a fence, but it's so the screening of the sense of privacy is from vegetation.
Yeah, and we have the board of directors does this walk through the development, and you get a little notice like you need to trim your trees so you can see through. But then they always kind of grow back in some places. But the general idea is we want eyes on the common area because that's why we have no crime here, is that there's
Oh.
this feeling when you walk through that people can see you and if they decide to even pick fruit, usually somebody's going to go out and say, hey, that's our tree. You can have a few, but please don't pick it all.
That's great. And then the reason to get together, is it in the common areas? Is it for gardening, or how would you describe? The place is wonderful for the semi-private. I'm just curious about the reason.
The reason initially for a long time, it was each common area with 4 houses on either side was to get together and decide what they wanted in their common area and maintain it jointly. And this went on for a long time until the board of directors was briefly controlled by some people who were not happy with that and who set the rule that each person had to maintain their own space, part of the common area from your house out to the sidewalk. Some common areas decided to just continue the old way. Mine decided not to. So that reason to get together is reduced, but still it's open. And so you do run into your neighbors, but I do feel like there are people I would like to know that I've moved in that there's really no reason to get to know them.
And so that's a cluster of 2x2 houses around a path.
No. On the longer stretches, it's 8 houses and 8 houses on the other side, but divided into 4s. So
So with the,
Or-
oh, this is, so the common area is not split by the path and the swale. It's, each common area is on one side of the path and the swale.
Okay, so you have
No.
4x1.
That's a question.
path and the swale road runs right through the middle of the
Oh,
common.
okay, so it straddles that.
Right.
2x2 or 2x4. Okay.
And
So usually 4 neighbors maximum, or did you get 8 neighbors together doing
It's
something?
8.
Oh,
So the
or
yeah.
4x2.
The idea is that eight neighbors form this group, and initially we're given the ability to have a certain amount of money together to decide what you wanted to put in your common area. So that worked for like probably 15, 20 years until the renegades came in briefly and changed their minds.
That's
I wanted to mention one connection with what Judy said just now with regards to Brian. You asked what was the purpose in a way of the common area or the intent of getting people, and besides the social aspect of it, all of the members of the common area had one common responsibility, and that is to preserve the swale such that the swale will be maintained to flow. And so there was one connection that I think is foundational in the whole project is that, you can have a common area and this and that, but the fact that there was an infrastructure that everyone had to pay attention to. So then people were collaborating. And if someone went in and put in a dam on the swale, they will be told you're not supposed to do that. So I think that the water, the way I looked at the project for all these years, is water is the connector as well of all of the residential areas in the place.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about
That's-
that, Ricardo, but you're right.
That's really,
That's beautiful.
maintain the swale. That's good. Now I'm a little confused because I thought the development was flat, and so is the
Oh,
swale
no.
facilitating east-west or west?
I'm sorry, Judy, but Mike actually developed enough of a slope. For water to run, you don't really need that huge grade.
1%.
yeah.
And he moved dirt from the east side of the property towards the west side of the property, raising earth up. So in a way, I have a video that I look at it as a watershed. So Mike created a ridge, and the ridge is located in the northern western side of the project, and a ridge of 5 feet, maybe 10 feet
I
from
can
low
see
to
it.
high. And that is your highest place in the project. And so water from there is going to run west to east and then north to south and south to east as well. But the key factor is where the ridge is located. So Mike, no, actually, I was thinking of Carl. Carl, is this your map?
No, this is from Google Earth.
No,
Yeah.
but who's controlling the map?
I am.
Brian.
Oh,
Brian.
Brian.
Oh, Brian, thank you, Brian.
Uh-huh.
So if you go to if you go to the village aviary, that there is like a purple circle, the purple one, that one. So if you come south down, yes, just hold it. And then this area where you are is the ridge. In
Okay.
fact, right over there is the ridge, and there is a cherry plantation. And then the green that you see further south, right there, is the big vineyard.
Yeah.
Yes, so all of that is the big vineyard, and you can see the trees. So if you were standing right in that intersection, that will be your high point in that rate. And so there was that aspect about the design that Mike didn't need a computer to actually make it happen.
Old
All right,
school.
so it goes east, and then the swale, I imagine the walkway is on a high point and the swale goes down
Yes.
a little bit, and then there's a little trough here that on either side, so you have two swales
Yes.
in the common
So-
areas that go to the east and then south.
Well, exactly. So the ones where you are, where your cursor was, is running from east to west up to that swale that is where you're getting to. And then anything from the ridge where we were is west to east, is flowing west to east. The interesting thing is that it's all about slopes. And so, and I'll send it back to you, Judy, but what Mike did, for example, with all of the streets, like if you go to Overhill, the street that is over there, kind of, I don't know where your cursor is, but let's say that, yeah, that's Overhill. So if you go to the west of Overhill, to your left, and then they are all ending in cul-de-sacs. And so from that point forward, as the street moves from west to east, there is a slope from north to south on the street itself. So it could be a few inches of slope. And so all the water that is going to fall on the street is going to collect on the south side of the street, where there is a cement swale, if you will, that moves the water all the way to where, if you go to the end of Overhill, over there on the west side, yes, on the east side, right there where you have your cursor, there's a lagoon, there's a pond. And so the water that was coming down from Overhill is going to pond. Yeah, so it's going to pond right there. And then there is a swale that takes it to the lagoon. So if you get past that house, all that green right there and all those trees right in where you were, just, yeah, that's a lagoon. So that's the Overhill Lagoon, and it fills with water, and it's a beautiful sight. And so like that, there are 3 lagoons, and there's like 3 or 4 ponds. And that's where Mike put in the water collection on the east side of the project, obviously because that flow is brilliant.
Nice.
Thank
you, that's great.
I just Brian, I just put a JPEG file that we created. We created for a presentation,
Thanks,
Yes.
Brian.
and
Sure.
and Judy, I hope that's okay. I did that bit, but because all of the maps that were available on the internet were not sort of quality enough.
Yeah,
No,
this
it's better.
this is great. The university is collecting all my stuff to put into a library, and I don't have a map, anything that good
It's a good one.
to give
Well,
them. So
If you don't sue me, you're welcome to have this.
okay, well, I have no intention.
I didn't want to
suing
cut.
you.
No, it's
I like it.
Sure.
and Ricardo helped me. You know, he sort of helped me sort of get this right. But if there's any problems, it's Ricardo's fault.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, but if
Okay.
there's anything you want edited, we will certainly adjust it.
Okay.
No, you have the lakes and the lagoons. Nice.
Nice. Yeah. And for clarity, are there 2 swales per common path or 1 swale per common path?
When,
One.
Just one.
yeah.
So it would go, yeah, to one side or the other. That makes sense.
And aside from, but also the streets. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the streets are also designed to carry water, direct the water.
Well, of course, yeah. I wanted to mention just one more thing. Is Brian still with the thank you. If you
Yeah.
come to the further south part of the map. Okay, so now take a straight line from where you are to the west, and all the way to the west where the broken line is. This broken line is the most brilliant aspect of the whole project. I mean, the whole project. But what Mike did here
Which part is it? Just the
yes, the broken line, the one that Brian is moving. I'll give you a very brief. So I understand Mike and Judy own the lot that is where the white area is after the street at the bottom. And so what he did is he installed a pipe on the south side of the street in the other lot, so that the water that was going to be captured there was going to be transferred to the property.
Oh, yeah.
And so he has, in this location, he has 2 entry points for water on the south side of the street and the north side of the street. In this case, these streets are level, so the water that enters this point is one of the biggest amounts of water that feeds the system, and it makes it into like a river. If you think about it, that water is moving from south to north, wrapping around the Big Green, and then entering the Overhill Lake common area through the swale, and then it exits towards the street, which is Arlington. And so the interesting thing is that all of the outlets where there is the arrows to the right-hand side, they all have an exit point, so that if there is a, like we are having now, more rain in short periods of time with the atmospheric rivers, then there's too much flow for the system to hold it. But then there are escape valves, if you will, places for that excess water to join the city's stormwater system that runs up to the where you are, Brian. Thank you. That is called the West Pond. And so that is another component of the bigger system, like Judy was describing, that the city of Davis really has expanded. And so the stormwater of all the neighborhoods in this area of the west side of Davis end up in that pond that feeds habitat year-round with birds and all kinds of, it's a very special place. Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, and my impression is, I bet you got a lot of water from this road that collects here and goes through this river all the way over, because you got a large hard top over this area. Okay.
Yes.
Seems like a good design. It's a big collecting area.
It is. Yeah. Wonderful.
Nice. Good.
Judy, were you going to say something?
Anyway,
In a moment of silence, there, in Jeff Lawton's 2013 video, I think he really starts with that element, and he makes a big point of taking the street water and directing it to the landscape.
Huh.
Judy, have you seen that video?
Nope.
A lot of cities are taking seriously, at least in the street phase.
Yeah.
Well, I think the EPA helped with their non-point water pollution standards.
Yep.
Also, the part of my experience with water was I designed designed 3 buildings and some master planning for redoing a campus that for the Chino Basin Water Conservation District, which I think it's the oldest water conservation agency. It's in San Bernardino County. And much of the building we designed and the parking lot and they redid a demonstration garden from kind of your typical 1980s low water native plant, well, to something that really demonstrated some new thinking, but specifically they wanted to demonstrate permeable paving and how to incorporate swells into the architecture, art into the development. So that was a project I was very proud of.
So I'm kind of curious because it's 50 years now and we're starting to see some changes. You talked about ADUs that people are sort of putting up without a great deal of attention to what has been there before. Maybe they don't really understand or know what was there before, but they're just putting things in. What other changes do you see happening? And kind of back to the community part of it, are there rules or ways of working with the community that were designed to kind of help the design stay where it is, and for people to value? We talked about the swales and that the swales are everybody's business, that they have to be aware of them and manage them. Are there other things like that that help people be conscious of the design that you created?
I understand, although I haven't seen it, that when somebody buys a house or moves in, they get a pamphlet which talks about the swales and the general ideas around the community so that they know what they're moving into. And I think, it's so well known now that I think everybody moves here intentionally because they know about it and want and buy into the ideas that we put forth.
But somehow it does seem that what Catherine is suggesting might be amplified. That even if someone's moving in there because they think they know what they're getting, they may not be aware of the nuance and the importance of some of the aspects of the design. So there's a loss of connection to the history and the basic principles. Are there tours that go through that, or
Constantly from all over the world.
right? But I mean, somehow that feels like that could be used to help educate
Yeah,
the current residents
yeah.
to really care for the history of the place.
I don't know. What do you think, Ricardo? I think everybody gets it, and that's why they live here. But what do you-
Yeah, I would share that there's definitely a demographic
Hmm.
change
Mhm.
based on earned income. So the people that are moving in can afford to, or their parents can afford to buy them a house here. And so maybe there's a different level of humility from the original group that knew that they were getting in the ground with the expectation that they were going to have to get a shovel and work and engage themselves in building. Whereas now you're just getting a brochure from a realtor in the Bay Area who says, "Oh yeah, for $1 million you can move into this beautiful place. It's all mature. Everything is done. Everything is ready." So there's different expectations, and I think that those have been reflected in some of the board of directors that we've had in the past maybe 10 years, where the way to get things done here is you volunteer for the board of directors, and there's no competition most of the time. So you get in and then you get your friends in and then you make the changes that you want, like what Judy said that these guys did back in the early 80s, maybe. I don't know, Judy. But to the extent that there's different expectations. For example, there's a group who looked at the Village Homes Community Center and then felt that it was old and that it didn't look really nice and that they didn't have a Wi-Fi and that they was also rented to the most beautiful project this community has had, which was the Rivendell children facility. It was a babysitting center. There was a co-op at the beginning. And then these board of directors kind of like worked through, and there was COVID and they didn't help them and they pushed them out, and because they wanted to do a remodel. And right now the community is going to spend $500,000 on remodeling a community center that I personally think that we can do with a linoleum in the kitchen still, because still durable.
Yeah, and
But they want tiles, and they want more stuff. So there is a cultural difference, I think, in perspective that permeates the culture of the United States. I mean, people want 4,000 square feet. So the other thing that actually is happening, Judy, that is interesting is some folks have actually bought 2 lots, and they have built themselves some mansions. I mean, there's only 3 or 4 of those new ones, but it lost the principle of small square footage, lower total energy cost, and then you have some outdoor space that is commonly owned that you can enjoy and be part of it. So you don't need to build a house that has every little thing that you don't want to even get out of the house.
Right.
I think the idea with Mike and Judy was that we would have these not so pretty houses, and then you just want to get out. And so you spend time
I
outdoors.
wouldn't say that. I like the inside of my house too.
Patrick has a question too. He was wondering if there was a community land trust that was considered for the property, so that the land was community owned, but you
It
own the
is
house, but
community owned.
the land
is.
itself is.
The land is community owned by the homeowners association, and then we wanted to have a place where you could buy groceries or have a restaurant or something, which was going to make money. And of course, homeowners associations can't do that. So we worked with some very creative friends who were attorneys to figure out how we could have an organization that owned the Plumshire. It's a corporation we call that area the Plumshire. And the homeowners association owns that fully, but Plumshire has its own board of directors. So we have complete control over the area that is even being leased to a restaurant, and actually there's apartments that are leased over there too, and businesses. It's a little business park.
Mhm.
Is Plumshire the name of the restaurant, or I love that name?
Yeah, no, it's the corporation that owns that property. The restaurant is Osteria Fasulo, and I swear it's the best restaurant for miles around. We got so lucky. We got an Italian who really knows how to cook.
It is an excellent restaurant.
How long has it been there?
You've been here.
Yeah, I've been there. And I also really enjoyed the parking lot next to that restaurant. That it's really a beautiful parking lot.
Wow.
Just in the way it's planned and the plantings that obscure the cars, and there's so many good things about that project.
Seth, Seth is the architect. I just love his attitude. Not enough architects would say, I just love that parking lot. So
Well, yeah, there's something to be said though about parking lots that shade cars.
Well, yeah,
It's
that's
putting them into
essential.
the sun. I think
California.
there's a lot to be said for that.
There is.
How about the apartments? Are they really part of the community, or do they seem to be kind of separate?
No. I live across the street from somebody who has a very small 2-bedroom, 1-bath house and a couple of kids, and he's my handyman. And so there's, you don't look at people for how big their house is or how much money they have. I don't think we differentiate that. We're all village homeowners or resident. You feel that way?
Yes, absolutely. I felt that way very much when I came in the mid-90s, and there was a large group of folks like ourselves in the mid-30s, and we had a whole generation of kids. There was 20, 30 kids running around. And so that was really special. We went through another demographic change, like our group. When our kids graduated from high school, we had an era when there weren't that many children around. And it had to do with obviously demographics and prices. But in the last 10, 12, maybe 15 years, there are many new families. So we have a new crop of kids, which is very beautiful to have. Some of them actually are children of parents, families of kids or that grew up here. So there's maybe 3 or 4 or 5, Judy's son included,
And
who-
grandchildren.
who just moved across the street from her after building his own home, and brings kids with him. So in that sense, I would say it's a success because there is a desire to regenerate
Yeah.
the culture and the population. Yes.
So I'm curious, you mentioned that Judy's son built his own home. Did he build a new house in the subdivision?
Yes, there was one little tiny lot on my street that was bought by a hippie because he just wanted a piece of land. And so he held that piece of land, which had a couple trees and a lot of weeds until he passed away. And then it went on the market. And the residents on either side wanted to buy it so that they could have expand their area. But the relatives told Chris, no, we'd prefer that you live there. And what do you think it's worth? And he figured out, well, how much would it cost to build a house and how much would the lot then be worth? And so they sold it to him, which I got really lucky because there were no lots available for many, many years, excepting for that one.
What year was that?
When did he?
That was
Chris did
recently?
it?
Or?
Very recently, yeah. Chris's house was just finished.
Mhm.
Brian has a question about the HOA
The
costs.
HOA, yeah. So is there an HOA? Is there an extra fee that people pay for ground maintenance and that kind of
Oh,
thing?
yeah. Pretty significant. 200 and what is it? 60 something now?
Okay. That's
month?
actually not too bad.
A month or year?
No, it's
Or?
not because no, a month, but you get a swimming pool, you get
Oh yeah,
playground,
that's right. Yeah.
you get so much free fruit that it's really worth it if you're a vegetarian to live here.
I've seen reports that some people, over the years have, had 70% of their food from the site.
Yeah, I think you can do that. I kind of think I might come close to that.
You
And
have
a lot of
your-
people have chickens.
Mm.
Yeah, we've had a little problems with the chickens.
Uh-oh.
Some little animals got in there and
Oh,
ate the eggs and then hurt the chickens. And so I don't think we have any right now.
But
No
but
chickens
the,
at all?
the organic gardens are lush. I mean, so
yeah.
productive.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
get all my fruit and vegetables from here. So it's just
Mhm.
dairy and meat.
Now, are there issues with chickens, or is it more having to do with the bird flu or something? Are chickens compatible with this kind of community?
Oh yeah, it works, excepting that rats get into the food and some animal has gotten into the last remaining chicken coop and
It's
Yeah, foxes probably,
likely raccoons.
or raccoons, yeah.
We think it was an owl
Ah,
by the way of the killing. I had 5 chickens in the garden that I garden with my friend who we garden together. And we basically, in the morning, each of the 5 of them were flat in the ground with their necks cut.
oh,
And that was it. There wasn't, they didn't take them apart. They didn't, pull their
you didn't
their
eat them at
meat
all.
or anything. They just killed them and maybe took some blood and then got out.
good.
So we are right now raising new chicks. and we need to repair the chicken coop, make sure that there's no place where an owl or even a raccoon, if that's the case, could get in. But yes, there are maybe 5 or 6 chicken coops along the North Gardens that have been approved over the years, which is fun. It's nice to have that too.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a possum that got into my neighbor's chicken coop.
Oh, yeah.
And underneath the ground and up inside. She couldn't figure
Oh.
out how this animal was getting in and still locking the gate. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Judy mentioned that when they went to the city council, someone said, "Oh, this place is going to be infested with rats."
Yes.
Well, it actually is. Some of us have to have like a pest control company come in and do maintenance because there is a large population of squirrels and rats and raccoons and other critters.
With all the fruit.
Well,
Yeah.
that's right. And not all the fruit gets picked. And like there's oranges right now in the trees that you look at them and they're half eaten. And it could be the squirrels. And the squirrels now are like all over the place. But it's part of the project. I mean, to the extent that they created a space where a new landscape was flourished as a result of all that amount of water that was available for growth from day one as they were getting to plant these trees. And so we have a bit of a habitat. And so you just have to have rats if you're going to have a habitat. So I think that most of us kind of like appreciate it. I don't know if appreciate it, but
Oh.
definitely understand this.
New York has rats too. So what are you going to do?
At least we get to pick some oranges in the
Yeah.
process.
But that is an interesting question because I mean, fruit trees are prolific. And if you don't pick them, they're on the ground. And if they're on the ground, they're a mess. So how do you manage that? I mean, do you pay people to clean it up or what happens?
Oh, it's most of it would fall on the common areas, and so the common area people are responsible for picking it up or not. And we have gardeners that also take care of the other areas in the community, and they pick up that fruit. But we produce more than we eat now, and especially the citrus this year, it's just crazy. And I'm thinking we need to find a senior gleaners or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was walking with Mike a couple of years ago. He was giving us a water tour, and we went by a community area where there was a tree, an orange tree filled. And I think that he might have said this maybe for 100th times. Oh yeah, you folks, because he's not here now in the neighborhood, should call in the food bank and then have them come and harvest, or do a community project and harvest all the trees, put them in boxes and drive them to Woodland. And so that could become a community project. So yeah, those are things
that's a great idea. Probably students from UC Davis would really pick that up.
Actually, students from UC Davis get a lot of fruit here.
Really?
they do.
They walk through and they walk away with pockets full.
I'm going to tell a story that I think is ethnic, in the sense that for a long time, some ethnic families would come to village homes to harvest the fruit that was in the trees that nobody was harvesting. Sometimes they were the gleaners that, let's say, if you remember your Old Testament, there's a passage there where it talks about fruit that falls on the ground belongs to the poor. So even if it's a private orchard, if it's in the ground, it's permitted for people to come in and actually take that fruit. And so to that extent, it's okay if, let's say, people would come and it's in the ground, they can take it, but they went into the trees too. So what happens sometimes is that one evening we would have the peach orchard that is like a block away from where I live, which is actually halfway from where Judy lives. We have this orchard, peach hill, and so one day we see there's a lot of fruit, and I remember saying to my wife, "Oh yeah, we should go this weekend and harvest." By the next day, it was gone, and so the community after that, the board of directors had to create signs that educated the communities that were coming in different languages, in Espanol, in Arabic, in Pakistani, in Indian, and in English. And so they put these signs and said, please, this is for the residents. And then the residents get educated. Then they created this idea that residents will have their own green bag, a bag that had an icon of Village Home, so that when you go out to harvest common fruit, like the orchards or the vineyards, you bring that bag with you so that other residents see you harvesting, they'll know that you're a resident. And if you happen to not have it, folks feel free to approach you and ask you, where do you live? In a way, it's like protecting the fruit that is going to fall on the ground.
Does that work? Is that
No,
working?
no. I just have to say that this is true with the cherries. So no cherries end up in the ground. That is the one fruit that does not go away.
I'm already checked. I
would
already
think
checked
the
my
birds
calendar.
get it.
Cherry season, I'm up there. Well, I love picking cherries.
Judy, what did you say?
The wild cherries we planted a whole lot of those in the beginning, and
Yeah.
there was some culture, Asian, I think, that would come around and pick those, and we didn't know what to do
Yes.
with them, but it was fine that they took them.
Patrick has a question about Big Ag. Patrick, you want to?
Unmute, Patrick.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm in a loud place. Yeah, well, the problem with not being able to make a full harvest and leaving stuff rotting on the vines is a big ag problem now too, because there's not enough labor. And we can't all count on the community and students to come by and do it for us. So that's what I meant as far as big ag problem.
Where are you?
under
Where are
harvest.
you? Hey, Patrick, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Sorry for the current
No.
context of my existence. My name is Patrick Kavanaugh. I met Carl and Dr. Brian on a call with the Catastrophic Wildfire Prevention Consortium. We've talked about both the power of living soil and water capture as far as a wildfire mitigation effort, and in addition to the built environment. My interest is permaculture gardens, regenerative technologies, the climate action fellowship. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you for being here, Patrick. Yeah.
I wanted to briefly mention that on May 4 and May 5th, Andrew Millison from Oregon State University Permaculture Program is coming to visit with Judy and Mike and to do a film, a permaculture film for the community, kind of like to update some of the ones that have been done before. But Andrew, I don't know if you have heard of his work, but he's done some really good efforts to document permaculture around the world. Andrew Millison.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
Bill Mullins. Go ahead.
This is been something that Catherine and I have talked about, and it's the fruit. It's part of the fruit question. In some of my presentations, which that I use Village Homes as a model for systems thinking, is I compare it to like specifically the radial design or when architects overlay a geometric pattern over nature without thinking about orientation or how water flows. And so, and my particular example I use is the radial design from the 16th century military towns, which were inspired by cannons and the need for like defending. But Catherine and I recently had a conversation, and she's really got me to realize that radial pattern, its origins are military towns and fear. But I think this radial pattern, which is still very popular amongst even eco villages and regenerative design people, it's so much about it's about fear and trying kind of guarding us against protecting us from nature or trying to control nature, and which got me to think that so village homes, it's very permeable, and in fact, and that people can come in and can take the fruit. It's part of that. And I even realized that I'm glad you have that somewhat controlled, but that it seems, and this is a question, it seems like imagine at some point you had the question, well, if we have fruit trees, people will come in and steal our fruit. But it seems like you made the decision, well, we're going to have that's what happens, and
We're going to have more than enough.
But that's part of the design with the clusters, the common areas, and the trees in the common areas, and the windows looking out. So I have a constant view all around.
Well, I can see that, but you didn't say, because I've heard that other people say, oh, we don't, no fruit trees because people will steal it. So you were able to get past that and
by the design, actually,
Yeah,
by
it's,
making semi-public and private spaces and making them clear that some of those spaces, most of those spaces are not, well, doesn't belong to the public or the city.
Yeah.
It's ours.
But you didn't build a wall, so I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't wanna do that.
This brings up a question of, I don't want to go here, but liability.
Yeah,
A lot of municipalities resist this kind of thinking because they're afraid of being sued. So I remember as a child, trees along the street would be fruit trees. And all of those were taken down and replaced because we used to climb the tree and get fruit.
oh, no.
But so does the neighborhood have its own insurance against that kind of challenge? Because I think
I'm
that would be a
guessing-
resistance of developers following this just out of fear.
Interesting.
I'm guessing that the homeowners association must have insurance, liability insurance.
Yeah.
Catherine, I just thinking about systems thinking and hearing a little more about what that means. I think as an ecologist that everything is integrated. Is
Yeah,
that system?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's about integration and about wholes and understanding how wholes are interdependent and interrelated.
All right.
I didn't mean to push that on you, but I was my way of saying you're a great systems thinker. You just
Ecologist.
Yeah, and yeah,
a
yeah.
good ecologist is a systems thinking.
Okay.
It comes naturally to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were cool before it was cool.
Definitely.
I also wanted to say about the fruit, and I'll put this in the chat because these two videos that I've shared with so many people, Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton, Jeff Lawton from 2013. So he's been in a lot of permaculture orchards, but he said, I've never seen any orchard that produces as much fruit and is such high quality fruit. He said, he said, I have not had one bad piece of fruit. So hats off to you for.
Well, hats off to us for the soils. We have the agriculture.
Exactly.
Well,
But that soil wasn't that way at the beginning.
that
That's what
soil
that
was
water does.
No,
that soil
that's
was good,
not-
but not that good.
But my side of the development grows better than the other side of the development.
Oh,
The
So
west
there-
side or the north side?
Pardon me?
The west side or the north side? Which,
The the north side. I do not know directions. I am
Okay.
handicapped that way.
Me either. That's good.
There's something I could add a little bit on that. The soil that this land had is a yellow clay loam, and it's Class A soil. It's as productive as any soil you ever wanted to have. This is the Yolo County. So the kudos go to the soil. The thing about the soil here, or the distinction that Judy is making with regards to location, is that Mike did a lot of scraping. And so, for example, we have this North Garden area that extends from the ridge on the middle of the project all the way to the north end of it. And so he brought topsoil from the north end and brought it up to create a hill. And so he scraped. So he took a lot of topsoil. My garden actually is on the ridge, and I have a fantastic soil. And then the fellows that are on the north vegetable garden that are further north, they don't have as much because of something to that effect. So yeah, no, but the beauty of it is that with the amount of water that was allowed to stay and to be permeable, to penetrate, the growth of the plant material is significantly faster than otherwise. And one of the things that Mike was commenting once to us was that within very few years, he saw that the water was infiltrating much faster under similar water precipitation conditions, let's say year to year. And it had to do with the fact that the trees are growing, they're cutting through. The thing with the soil of ours is that it's not very permeable. It actually, it holds a lot of water, but at some point is not like a sandy soil that is going to allow water just to percolate deeper, quicker. But he noticed that by the trees growing and growing so fast, the roots are creating channels where the water can come in and then drain much faster. So there is this connectivity there that is really important, or at least for us to understand that the water component, in my opinion, plus the design of it all, is what has allowed this habitat to grow to this point that where we are today. Yeah, some of that. Brian, you were thinking.
Yeah, there's, it seems like there's a floor plan I was going to share that includes the western half, and I'm curious if there's a history there, because both Carl's image and also some of the other floor plans show, like when I Google, you get this outline for the park, but I note with interest that this western half has the same floor plan of maybe paths and roads. And this is 225 homes, I guess. And this is maybe another 200. Did it split in two?
No. What you're showing right now is a neighborhood called West Manor. That you can actually see the West Manor Park. So yeah. the orange line that runs from Rosa Boulevard all the way to the north at Arlington, that is the boundary.
Okay.
Yes. So that's the western boundary.
Right. Okay.
There are some pedestrian paths that I think that connect the two neighborhoods.
Yes, but in general, the one on the left, my left,
okay.
Eel, that is a standard neighborhood. In fact, Judy told me once a story when I was doing a documentary that the realtors would drive by their project and tell the customers, oh no, don't look at that. Let me show you some standard neighborhood that is perfect, 3-2, and and they will take them to West Manor. But obviously there were enough folks that thought that this was the best idea since ever.
Is there a difference in property values?
Judy, what were you going to say?
I know, like my obstetrician lives in West Manor, and she said she walks through Village Homes all the time. So I think a lot of people use that. West Manor residents, I see them walking their dogs, and then they go back to West Manor, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's live happily together.
Is there a
Mhm.
difference in property values between the two?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
Isn't
tell you.
village homes like 10 to 15% more than kind of as a comparison?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would bet it's more than that actually. Because I was looking online the other night and to have 2 and 3 bedroom homes and these are small, they're not really large homes, even with 2 or 3 bedrooms, to be $1 million or $1.5 million would suggest to me that it's more than 10 or 15%, that it's pretty good pricing. And there's, I think, about 31 rentals, which is another piece of the pie I kind of wonder about because renters are different folks. They don't feel themselves permanent often, and they're quite often don't feel part of neighborhoods. So I'm just wondering if that's impacted
Mm.
the
I lived
community.
across the
too.
street from a house that was rented twice, and both of them were very integrated in the neighborhood.
Nice. Okay.
That's great. I'm curious, if there's a fruit tree in your semi-common area, do the folks in the 8 houses with that fruit tree in it get priority, or is it pretty much the whole community gets access to the fruit on the tree and perhaps a broader community, the fruit on the ground?
Common area residents maintain and own those trees,
Or they
but
all?
I mean, yeah, like the trees on my property are supposedly mine, but I share them with neighbors who want them because there's more than enough to go around.
Right. That's good.
The other thing,
Now,
Brian, is that you have the common areas with their fruit trees if they have them, but also you have the village homes land that is the upper common land that has the vineyard and has the cherry orchards or the orange orchards, obviously apricots and peaches. So we have places where we can go with our green bags and
Okay.
harvest. And then when you want to steal from someone, from their own, there was a cherry tree right over here by Ellendale Lane that was the most beautiful cherry tree of them all. You know, like, and it was full right in front of the home of this lady. She would protect that tree day in and day out. So there was no such thing as you dare go harvest over there. You'll tell your kids, no, we can't go there. We have to.
Amazing. That's those stories. I have to share with you, we lived for half a year in Singapore, and I work with some of the architects that helped design some of Singapore, and they've gone to they have high rises, of course, it's 5 million people on an island. But the high rises, what they've done is they'd have a high rise and a park connector network, which is a long, skinny park, and then another high rise. And when they went to this, the homes that looked over the park, in between each high rise, were twice as valuable as the ones that were not. And so this park connector network now interconnects, like I've ridden 4,000 kilometers around Singapore just in 6 months. And it was all through the park connector network. And so continuous bike lanes without traffic and trees and a place for people to walk. And it turned out, when applied to high rises, a similar architecture has doubled the value of those homes that have access and view of the park connector networks.
I would ask Seth that in architecture, I would imagine that there's a real craving for nature in general. I mean, people have a backyard and they'll plant a few trees, but the fact that if you look at the urban walkway with trees gives you a higher value, is like a front, like beachfront. Like you can see the ocean from 3 miles away or something to that effect. So there's that need that I think what gives us pleasure here, living here, is that sense that we step outside of the house through our backyards and there's plenty of vegetation, or we go to the gardens and there's time to contact with the soil and work with the plants and look at the deal with insects and so forth. So that connectivity with nature that Judy and Mike actually created by allowing or convincing people that let's have small lots so that we can share the land, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's true. But there are different kinds of people. I think this is what you're describing is what I've done in my small urban garden in Berkeley. I have about 30 fruit trees in a standard lot. And it's an amazing place because of that. It took a couple decades, but here we are. But the human forest interface is really what's happening, and it's a problem, right? I mean, what you're describing is people want to be near nature, but they are not doing it responsibly, and we haven't managed forests well, and they're catching on fire and
What you
destroying
mean by
homes.
moving up to the mountains with their
Right,
houses?
right, and in the mountains and even close by the cities. I mean, there are so many areas that people want to be with nature,
Yeah.
adjacent to nature, because of what you're describing, but it's done poorly.
Yeah.
What's happened in Village Homes is it's done sort of very consciously and deliberately to work. It's a very different world.
Yeah. Water makes a difference.
Yeah,
Water
and more
makes a
than that,
difference.
actually, the community, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pedestrian permeable and it's bicycling permeable, but it's driving cul-de-sacs. And that's something that we struggle with even here in Australia is the lack of, I mean, these subdivisions are designed for all these cul-de-sacs, but you can't get there on a bicycle. So there's no continuity, there's no permeability for bike trails. And then, it's all about land use rights and, trying to get a trail through somewhere is a real challenge. And so this notion of walking and biking is just, it makes a huge difference in terms of community engagement as well. So we're looking for communities that have that permeability here in Sunshine Coast of Australia. And it's an ongoing challenge. I mean, they are environmentally minded, but so many developments from the US to Australia have just had this cul-de-sac mentality and driving only. And we need to try to turn that around.
There's an interesting example.
Davis.
It's not exactly what you're describing, but in
Okay.
Davis also is a block of N Street in like Nancy, where houses on one side of that block and then houses sharing a fence on the next block. All of those people decided to take down the fences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it is a wonderland back there. And all they did was remove the back fences and the dividing.
And next week, we're going to have a March 12th is a talk by Mark Lakeman, a guy in Oregon. And that's one of the things he does to create villages in already established neighborhoods. So he'll be talking about
Oh,
how
that's
he
great.
does that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I encourage
really,
people
very
to come
effective.
Back to Davis and bicycles. This started in the 60s with Robert Summer, who was my major professor. And we have paths through Village Homes that the city owns, or at least the city pays for part of the maintenance of them.
Oh.
It's just really, cul-de-sacs can be connected if you plan that way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've got a nice diagram to share. I just turned on the bicycle pathways, and you can see when you toggle this,
Oh, how
all
sweet.
the bicycle paths that are connecting. And you can see the abundance. Of course, all the paths are pretty much highlighted here, but the density is great.
Yes.
So that is commendable.
Yeah.
It's a
great.
stark lesson right there.
Yeah.
Roads. Yeah. Yeah.
I put a picture of from Village Homes that I've used in a presentation.
In the chat.
In the
Uh-huh.
chat.
Nice.
It's
Oh, cherries are blossoming.
and two little kids. So
That's great.
Judy,
Tulips.
what other thoughts would you like to share?
Well, It's been lovely to meet you all, or to re-meet one of you. It's fun to talk about it.
Yeah,
On the spectrum of, just neighborhoods that don't know each other versus, let's say, a fully intentional community, where would you put Village Homes on that spectrum?
I mean, neighbors knowing one another.
Yeah, and I imagine I'm familiar with a couple of intentional communities where the common areas were even larger, and they sort of have a permaculture design ethos. There have been a couple of them here in Australia.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts on.
That's a great.
have they lasted 50 years, Brian?
Well, that's, usually it lasts one generation, and there have been 2 or 3 exceptions to that. But Oroville in India is probably
Yeah.
a good exception,
Yeah.
and there's one in Tennessee as well. But there's a generational challenge, and it comes to do with governance and what I'd call social permaculture. And the question is, can the best practices and design practices be formulated into a charter, if you will, well enough that the governance actually works for more than one generation?
Yeah.
So I guess the basic truth that I learned is that people only come together when there's a place and a reason to do so.
Yeah.
So where we've got places where people have a place to get together and a reason to get together, it'll happen. Otherwise, it won't.
Great principle.
And how would you compare that to co-housing?
Co-housing, the difference between village homes and co-housing is co-housing, you can't be a really private personal person, someone who's an introvert who doesn't want to speak with other people. Whereas in village homes, I felt like we should design it so that you have a choice.
That's great.
I've-
Well, good one.
I've noticed, looking from Village Homes and comparing it, looking and comparing it to intentional, more intentional communities. The difference is that Village Homes, it's less intentional. You don't, there's no secret handshake you have to know. You just, and that's and it seems more organic. Village Homes, the coming together.
Well, it's planned so that there's plenty of places like orchards, common areas, the pool, the community center. But we also want every house to have privacy as well. Because one of the research projects that I did as a student was studying this apartment complex where it was built so cheaply that you could hear one room to another, and then it had a double loaded corridor. And I ran into somebody who was going in and out his window to avoid running into people. And it's like, you could have heard your neighbors quarreling, or they could have heard you quarreling, so you don't even want to see them.
This is this is something you did when you were a student. You're part of your research, so that's
Yeah, learned a lot from that.
That's it shows. I mean, it's really
You applied what you learned.
Well, and it's an interesting, for me, exercise in design and governance and how the two come together in a very interesting way. I mean, I think that's one of the things about intentional communities, that there's very little design usually. It's not an
Oh, that's-
overarching conceptual thing they may figure out or plan, but it really doesn't have a holistic approach the way Village Homes has had. And that design drives so much of the behavior and how people relate to each other. I mean, that's Jane Jacobs, I think, is very much a big person in that. And intentional communities and even co-housing doesn't really do that. They'll put the houses together, but they're not designing the community. They're not really thinking about that other than a common house,
that's a really great insight.
Yeah, it is.
I'm amazed that Village Homes hasn't been replicated in 50 years more and scaled more than it has. It's almost a tragedy that it hasn't. And I wonder, is it because of some economic incentives? I almost wonder if there's more economic value that we should articulate to Village Homes than to other neighborhoods. And what we need to do is create that value proposition. Singapore has learned it. I mean, they actually, instead of cramming, high rises everywhere, it's, high rises curving along and a park connector network, and then another row of high rises. But almost all the high rises can theoretically be adjacent to the park connector network. And that's been a profound benefit. I've really enjoyed it. And I think we need to articulate that value proposition to get developers to move beyond, like right across the street, here it is, 2025. And they turned this beautiful meadow as a horse pasture, and it had ducks and trees, and it was just gorgeous. And they're trying to preserve, they completely kind of paved over the stream that went through the middle of it. And that's going to be some kind of driveway, I guess. They ran into some drainage problems, and it's just houses are so close together, and they don't have this kind of common area. And
Well, they
we feel
haven't
like
looked at
tragedy.
water. I think this is
not
one
applying
of
the
the
water.
lessons that I've really taken from Village Homes is understanding the water flow first. And then you
Exactly.
design around that. When you design around that, then
Mhm.
things work. You're not fighting it forever. So you're talking about drainage problems. Sure, because the water wants to be there. There's a great book called Water Always Wins, and that's exactly right. So you need to see where it wants to be and let it be. And it needs time to sink in. So you need spaces for it to do that. And all of that is in Village Homes. I think that makes a huge difference in so much. Just that initial thinking and layout creates a structure where the structure works to support the community as opposed to being in its way all the time.
And literally, it cost the developers more than half a year
Yes.
because they
And
had
yes,
a flooding
yes.
problem.
yes, yeah. And they'll
this
have it
is-
forever. It's not going to go away.
So
This
the
is
state-
I want to say this is a theme that in many of all my presentations about Village Homes is that by thinking smart about nature and starting with water and the sun, that it's always there's always value in it's all at some level it's always cheaper. And boy, that's can't
Cheaper
say
to
enough.
build and cheaper to maintain.
Yeah, and more resilient. And boy, Judy, you and Michael got that right, so right. And it's
so
Well, the
we have
knowledge
to-
has been here for more than half a century, and we just need to get it broadly distributed.
well,
Right,
in-
right. I
in
mean,
that-
the challenge is scaling it. And I think what Brian is suggesting is really important, that the economics needs to be figured out
yeah.
to
We need to
demonstrate
the value
the
proposition.
value. And it's got to
And
be the
positive.
value for the developer initially and what they're reaping from it.
Yep.
That's reasonable. And the value long term. And that can be done. I
Well, let's.
think it's an important next step, actually.
And also the
I'm sorry, Carl, let me just one comment, Judy. I remember having this conversation with you, and I asked you with regards to the economics of the project, yourselves, in terms of how many houses you're going to put in. And I remember you mentioning to me that the trade-off here was the ratio of the size of the lot with respect to the total amount of land available. And in that regards, that if you were going to be doing a West Manor development, the next door development, and you just did a grid and you created larger lots and you put in bigger houses, you fill up the same 60 acres. But by going with the smaller lots and smaller footprint, you ended up with 40 to 60% of the land that actually wasn't backyard land for each of the houses, but it became land available for a community. And the semi-private is the one that is inside your lot. Like, for example, in my lot, I have enough space because they build a smaller house to have a patio and a few trees in my side. Then there's the common area, whereas there's that exchange that we talked about earlier. And then again, there is the bigger Village Homes land for all of us. And what is beautiful to think about is that, if I understood Judy correctly, was that the economics of the project in terms of total houses built or total lots sold was equivalent as if you had sold the whole 60 acres as a conventional development. And what I think makes it even more powerful is that now we buy a lot that is small, we buy a house, but we also have this equity on 40% of land that happens to be part yours. But I did this documentary on the land, water, energy nexus in Village Homes a number of years ago for an organization called ECEEE that looked at the premium. It's almost like there's a premium value to the project as a result of the community landscape. So by creating this community landscape that created the spaces for the ponds and the lagoons and the swales and all of that is what has fed the growth of all these habitat, of all this vegetation, the biomass that gives us the value. Because now when someone comes here and is looking to buy a house, the realtor is telling them, you're buying this house, but you're buying that tree and you're buying that field and you're buying that other open space that you wouldn't have if you lived in your standard blocked neighborhood. And I think that that's the value proposition that couldn't really be explained. It's almost like people wouldn't believe that there's that connection to it until you see it and you live in it.
Mhm.
This is the value of Village Homes because it's an example of that value proposition.
Mhm.
I wonder if it's hard to sell.
Successful.
Somehow there's this, we've lived through 45 years of me generation, right? And so you're saying this, I've got 1% of this tree, it's like people kind of throw their hands up and they wonder, well, I wonder if that's a barrier.
It's a culture too. I mean, I think that Judy and her friends and the folks that were looking at these lots, they were coming out of the 60s. I
Sure.
mean, think about that generation. That generation was a unique culture that
And
had a lot of these principles were already kind of like, they were talking about these things. They were debating about these things. The US was going through an OPEC embargo and energy is now an issue. And so there was a conscience that I don't know if we have in your general real estate market at this point.
There is an example in the Berkeley Hills
Yeah.
where I do not live. Where there are, I think it's maybe six homes.
Okay.
And they all share land.
Huh.
And they're probably $4 million, $5 million houses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I think the value proposition is there no matter what. They share just a beautiful parkland of very mature oaks, and they share a swimming pool, and they all contribute to the maintenance of the grounds, and they have their own little private zones.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing wonderland if you have that much money, but it's the other end of the spectrum.
Mm.
I have a friend in Atlanta who lives on a cul-de-sac of 15 homes where they all own the land also.
Okay.
And he's been there for quite a few years. And they've been able to plant and have their own little ecosystem there as well. But he's also finding that new people who move in are too busy to take part in the community. And so that's been sort of difficult.
Well, I'm gonna need to say goodbye to all of you because I got a birthday party to go to.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Judy, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And
Been
Ricardo,
great.
you as well.
Thank
Just
you.
very much. We really
Yeah.
appreciate your wisdom and the wonderful thing you did.
Thank you. We were just lucky.
Well,
No, I think there was a lot more intention than that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Judy. It was lovely.
Yeah,
Thanks.
very nice. So come on back next week. We've got 3 more webinars that we're doing with different ways of looking at community. Everybody has got a different perspective. So next week it's trying to change what's already there. The next week is a couple in Oregon who have created 2 eco villages out of apartment houses,
Wow.
and they're for renters.
Fantastic.
So they're designed for renters. So that's a whole other thing. And then we'll talk about governance and getting people to come together and make decisions in the final thing. Ricardo?
Just to ask, I do have Carl's and your emails. If Seth and Brian would like to share your email with me through Catherine, I'd like to send you a link to some of the videos that I produced in 2021.
yeah.
They're very good.
Yeah,
we-
put
we
your
had a-
emails in the chat and
we had an atmospheric river event that generated an incredible amount of water
yeah,
that
5 inches.
you can see the whole system flowing and how it's distributed in real time with the rain coming down. And so you may enjoy it. I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I
5
don't
inches
know
of
how
rain
to-
and no flooding.
I'll have to copy from here on the side, or can you send that to me, Catherine?
I can
Uh,
send it to you.
Thank you.
Either way.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
Well, it's a pleasure. Do you folks have any other thoughts you want to?
I just
speak
wanted
in
to share that as a preview to next week, back in 2010, I looked at purchasing a set of kind of duplex or multiplex homes. It was a 2 rows of multiplex houses, 4 units each, and I think there were 8 units total. And the backyards were all tiny little fenced backyards, and we were planning to take out the entire backyard and make that the common area, and it would have mapped beautifully onto this architecture.
yeah, it's
So I'm kicking myself for that, and it would have been a great investment. We were worried about commercial interest rates of all things was what kept us.
There's a lot of reasons, yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing.
in our continue, in the near future, Brian, this question about the value proposition, that's a really I'd love to continue that conversation because
I
it's,
think Singapore as a country has realized it, and they did enough central planning. But it's there's a huge we're short 100,000 homes here in Queensland. I mean, it's like Florida from the 1970s. And so if we could move from those impermeable cul-de-sac houses where you can't bike and you can't walk to permeable ones that have this kind of through flow and these design principles and permeability for water as well, that could really transform Queensland, the state of Queensland.
Mm.
And I think we need to find good ways of making that happen and engage locally and hopefully build on these best practices.
I think that Village Homes offers a unique model for that as an example of what's possible. Like this now is the time for designing for 2050 or 2075.
Right.
Yeah, and part
Yeah.
of what we're kicking around here at Soil Smart too is a long, 5-day class where people learn to design the land to hold water first, and then get a sense of different kinds of building styles like village homes and some of their ancient techniques where they've actually used the orientation toward sun and wind to make the homes more livable, and then give the attendees a chance to actually play, to build models based on the land that they designed to hold water, and to do these kinds of things, and as a learning opportunity, because architects and landscape people do not understand that at all. And landscape comes last. So you have to pretty up what the architects and builders have messed up. And it's too late by then. You really need to have the land to hold water. And this is not just because it's good design. It's also because if we want to address climate change, we need to have water in the soil in order to have rain. So all of these things work together when we start thinking holistically. So
Definitely.
I just put another image in the chat from a city in India from 6,000 years ago, and the orientation is more or less east-west. It's within 10 degrees, but they integrated into the water, the rivers. To me, it's
the prevailing winds were west to east, then you would get some amount of swamp cooling.
Yeah.
Town and Lower Town.
But
Just
Thinking about these things makes it easy, will make it easier in the future.
I agree.
Ricardo, I would like to come visit.
Please do. Please do.
I'd like to
Colin,
live
Randy-
there, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
that's step two.
So I usually say to friends or folks who want to visit, come when it's raining.
Yeah.
Because this is when you really, really feel this place. If it's raining and if it's a good rain, you just have that experience of being connected with the water. So that is another aspect. In my personal experience, I have been working on water conservation, water efficiency, energy efficiency for a long time, my life. And so I bring that with me. And then I live in a place that water has connectivity, as I mentioned, to the whole neighborhood, even though people don't see it like that. I mean, that's a little bit philosophical, but from my perspective, is really what is happening. Is like is the bloodstream of the place that has fed the landscape where we are. And if it's a really good rain, then you just have a sense of the flow and how it's moving, and it's moving from one end to another spot, and from that spot goes underneath the bridge and it ends up in a lagoon, and it's kind of fun. It's a lot more fun. Now, having said that, Seth, I don't know how much water we're going to be having in the next, for the rest of the water year. The January was pretty dry, and we had some rains, and it looks like a dry going forward. There's going to be some rain next week. And if you tell me that you want to stop by, of course, I'm here. And it will be fun to take an umbrella and walk with you. Well, you'll walk. I'll have to go in my little handicap cart that I have to use now, unfortunately.
That sounds like a wonderful time.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
let me know. So what I like to do is I will send you an email with the link to some of these videos, and please feel free to come anytime you let me know. And Brian, when you get to be around this side of the world as well.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Very good to
Yeah.
meet
Thank
Look-
you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Catherine. Great.
Yeah.
Good night.
Be well.
Good night, everybody.
Now.
Bye.